Buying
you
followers.
10, 9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna call the ad.
Welcome to Gather Geeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. This episode is a Gather Geeks special sponsor edition. Here's your host, BizBash chairman and founder, David Adler.
Welcome to this special edition of Gather Geeks. Today we have a fascinating interview with 20-year event veteran Matthew Byrne of Byrne Production Services. He wants to up the game of virtual events. He is bringing broadcast quality techniques to safe virtual events by creating a standalone studio in a box that is sent to speakers' homes and is essentially a pop-up and modular audio and video capture that works in any location. It's so simple and doesn't require any accompanying staff or setup. Because he's on a mission to educate the event industry that the quality of presentations will increase engagement and a higher level of experiences that will make virtual events even more effective. The approach he advocates is borrowed from what we see every day with television hosts offering high-quality broadcasting from home that keeps the presenter safe without any technological snafus. So take a listen.
So let's first go into a little bit about who is Matthew Byrne,
right?
And what is your connection to the event industry, especially right now? You know, you have a lot of passion for this business. I noticed all through your website the word passion is used over and over again. What about what we do you love, and how are you innovating to make it work for today?
All right. Well, so to begin, I started in this business. Well, actually, I started in the live performing arts industry many, many years ago, working as a production manager, stage manager for large-scale productions, dance, tours, opera, musicals. And I really loved that world and the role that I had in it, which was more of a facilitator. I worked with very, very creative people who had some kind of muscle that I wasn't born with. And my job in that industry was to make those creative things a reality in a practical manner. And so it was a facilitating role, like literally working with them to make that happen. And so I made the transition into the events world about 20 years ago, primarily working in audiovisual and production, where my theatrical skills sort of came in handy. And since then, I think I've worked for almost every large-scale AV company in the world. I've run my own agency and worked for a few boutique agencies over the years, and then in what is now probably regarded as the best timing in retrospect, in fall 2019, I started Byrne Production Services.
Fall of 2019.
In fall of 2019, it was literally perfect timing. Yeah. At the time, it seemed like a great idea.
Oh, the height of the market, things were going well.
Yeah, exactly.
The world was absolutely on fire from a good perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So then, fast forward to February, March 2020, and the world began to collapse around us in the industry. And I think I spent time the way that most of us in this industry did, which was to spend 2 weeks on my couch, under a blanket, and hoping that it would all end soon. And then I had a very interesting conversation with a audiovisual vendor of mine, and he was lamenting about being a rental company, and that's essentially what he does to generate revenue. What is he going to do in the near future? And he started to use the word pivot, and but do I want to pivot into becoming an IT professional, because that's what's potentially going to happen? And I kicked back on that statement with him and said, and it's one of the reasons I don't like the word pivot, is because pivot connotates that you are changing. And what I try to do now is to recontextualize all of the professional skills that I had as an event production person into a new channel, which happens to be online, virtual, and hybrid. So that's where we're heading right now. We've started to develop new solutions around virtual events, how to professionally manage them, professionally capture video and audio, and produce that event in a broadcast fashion, and particularly focusing on the production process and making sure that we have the ability to affect every point along that process in a meaningful way, rather than a Zoom call, which is essentially like getting in a car and only having stop or accelerate as your controls. And so, through Studio in a Box and Master Control and all of the.
So your innovation after the 2 weeks on the couch.
Sure. Yeah.
And talking to the people in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
what the light bulb went off.
Mm-hmm.
That you should package this in some way, because you need to figure out a way to scale it, because you can't go to things.
Well,
correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
So what was your thinking, and how did you evolve this idea? And I know you didn't pivot, but you evolved.
Sure, that's a good way of putting it. So we had a couple of main objectives in creating a solution. We were seeing a lot of the Zoom meetings that were the early virtual events, which was essentially a Zoom call with a little bit of graphics on it. And, we were finding that and we're hearing from our clients that, the video quality wasn't great. There seemed to be a lack of control. There was, confusion. A rehearsal seemed to be like walking into a dark room and not seeing anybody until click, you're live. And now I hope I had everything prepared. So we had two sort of main objectives in creating that solution. One being to up the production value and put professional gear in somebody's house or office. We knew that would be, say, a CEO or head of marketing or a keynote speaker who may not necessarily know how to operate professional camera equipment or lighting equipment. And so objective one was to take all of that control out of the speaker's hand, so that we could do that remotely via some broadcast technology. The second main objective was to battle the what would happen if we put this professional equipment in somebody's house, but then we would have to send like a technician who knew what they were doing. And so we saw a big safety concern there, and certainly contact tracing and contamination risk was a huge factor. So that was the second reason why we went into that model. And the other one, the main objective was to create familiar tools for speakers and presenters that they're used to on doing a live event. David, you have spoken at many a live event, and you can probably speak to this experience of walking into a ballroom and being greeted by an ASM, being given a tour of the space, being shown your downstage monitor where you have prompting and or confidence slides, and putting on a mic that was professionally balanced and operated by a technician, not worrying about the lights or the projection screen or any of that content happening. You were just concentrated on that. And what we found in Zoom and a lot of platforms was none of those things were part of the production process. They were either, left to your own devices. I hope your laptop is over to the corner here to be able to keep it out of eyesight. But it wasn't an integrated solution. So that was the second main objective on that, was to create the tool, like create a single box that you could pipe in direct feedback channels to as well. So Studio in a Box now can send a multi-view out to each one of the boxes individually and give you a prompter, script. You can do a downstage monitor of your slides. You can also have like little pop-up windows of everybody else who's on the panel. So really just concentrating on that familiarity of production flow that every speaker and or producer would ever need.
So just to be clear, it looks like, if I understand you right, you don't need to use your own computer, or you do?
You don't.
Like, it's the same way when you watch the networks now. I guess you see the Anderson Coopers and the people at home, but you can't really tell they're at home.
Yeah, exactly. And that's precisely it. In fact, most of the time, when we talk about the end product and what it's going to look like, we actually say, we talk about cable news and the idea that, under a lot of platforms, you can do screen layouts where you have a host and, 3 panelists and an interesting graphic background. But once you get into that state, you're stuck there until you move on. Whereas because of master control, which is our back end, think of that as the production broadcast truck sitting outside of your house. We can live switch. We can focus on just the host. We can go just to graphics. We can go cycle through all of our panelists. We can do 2-ups and 3-ups and 4-ups, and then it gives you that production feel of your webcast or your broadcast.
So where does you have the studio and you have the control. Mm-hmm. Where does the producer, who is the planner, let's say, that's hiring this or doing this, do they sit with? They're not contacted with you at all either, right? It's all separate.
They can be completely remote, or like we've done some setups where we've gone into a small broadcast studio and, of course, socially distanced. But all of the communication tools, all of the routing, all of the video management is all done in a cloud and remotely. So I've actually produced shows from this desk here with talent in Vancouver, Montreal, and a couple of in the States. And my master control is actually in Toronto. So I didn't actually have to leave my desk to produce that show.
But you're the show producer in that case, right?
That's exactly it.
Yeah,
and so if you were producing the show from New York, where you are right now, we would simply give you a login and give you the ability to watch your multi-view, and then the comm channel is all cloud-based as well. And it's actively managed. So and it's very much like a ClearComm that you would have on site for any event. You press a button on your keyboard and you talk, and you release it, and you're on silence again.
So the one thing I noticed of the way Zoom works is that you see all the audience there. In your setup, are you able to see people viewing like a Zoom, or is that not appropriate?
No, I don't think that's that's one of the things that I think is wrong with Zoom. Wrong with Zoom for this application.
Right. Right.
I always talk about platforms, whether it be a Zoom or a vFairs, 6Connect, any of those sort of large-scale digital platforms are digital venues, and they match a real-life venue. Zoom is a digital venue that matches a conference room, and so if you were to try and do a multi-day conference in a conference room, you might be laughed out of town because it's the inappropriate venue. Zoom and Microsoft Teams, all of those sort of meeting apps are really appropriate for having 5 people in the room be able to see each other and talk directly to each other. For a virtual event, which is essentially a broadcast, you wouldn't watch TV and watch the news and expect Anderson Cooper to see you.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I think people are worried about in producing these, is that they're worried that they're not going to see their audience. There are other things that you can add on to the broadcast, because essentially the broadcast is not the virtual event. The broadcast is part of the virtual event, but you have to add on a lot of different things to be able to get into that.
So you're actually, there's a big difference between a virtual environment and a virtual event. It sounds like you see a lot of these platforms, quote unquote platforms, with here is the networking session and here is here's the trade show floor. What is your feeling on all that? Is that superfluous in many cases, and that the broadcasting is the primary avenue for professionalism?
Well, I'll answer that in 2 ways. One, I'll say that yes, they are part of the virtual event, and they are integral to that. But each part of those is not the virtual event. It is simply the tools that we use. So I always like to say there is no app for this. right? Everybody seems to be looking for the app, the one-stop shop. And in that mentality, if you were to walk into the Royal York Ballroom here in Toronto and say, well, it's got a pull-down screen and some chairs, I functionally have all the parts that could make an event, but you wouldn't do that. You would want to add an AV vendor and a caterer and some swag and all of these things that make all of those components into an experience. The second way I'll answer this is we've seen virtual events work really well already. But I think we're all hesitating as an industry to adopt these things because we think that they're outside of our purview. And the example I like to give is, and I'm gonna really up my nerd factor here.
Go for it.
is The Walking Dead, which aired on AMC.
Right.
This is a perfect example of what a virtual event should be. So, for the week leading up to episode 6, you would see advertisements, you would see communications, you would get a push from AMC to go and download an app. It wasn't a big push because they knew that there was a native way to engage the audience, and there was a non-native way, being Twitter and Facebook and all of the other social media platforms out there. And so the day of the broadcast itself, the broadcast was a thing that was important and the main focus of the event. But the event starts taking place about an hour before, when the AMC team were tweeting out who's going to die on the episode this week. And they were promoting Talking Dead with Chris Hardwick, which was the after show that would immediately follow. And they were saying, hey, go onto the app and do this thing that would engage with the audience, or via Twitter. And then the broadcast would happen. And like in a live event, everybody focused on the stage and wanted to hear the story and know what was happening. But immediately, and then at the end of the episode, that last 2 minutes where the shocking thing happened, where the character that you loved suddenly was eaten by a zombie, you would get Chris Hardwick to say, we'll be back in 5 minutes, right after the credits roll and a couple of commercials. And then we're going to talk to the actor who just died on the show. And then we're going to talk to these two people who are our special guests, and they're going to talk about how much they love the show. And then you would get out of the credits, and immediately Chris Hardwick was back on stage, and you're talking to this person and this panel. You were getting audience participation from the online audience, where they were, we got a tweet from this guy who said, what was it like to shoot that scene, to an audience member who was sitting down and would come down with a mic in their hand and go like, I'm really a big fan. I really want you to know what happened in this. Mm-hmm. And so that 1 hour broadcast isn't the event. The event is the broadcast plus the panel, plus the interaction, plus the lead up. And that was what made it an experience. And I think that's what we should be focusing on virtual events. So
it's still, you're still coming down to really good storytelling.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
As opposed to, here's the room,
mm-hmm.
Go play in the room without any context.
Yeah.
It seems like that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you're seeing in the trade show world where they're selling booths and things like that are trying to monetize the virtual event. Mm-hmm. And is that working the way it should be working, the way you see the platforms that are being developed? Or do you think that you need to have the focus that you're suggesting on the main storytelling, I guess?
Yeah, I will say that I don't have a lot of exposure into the exhibit world because, again, it's very much essentially those platforms are creating little microsites, and within those microsites, you can then go and view product A and its features and benefits.
Right.
Where I think that we need to go in that world is to create hybrid experiences. Let's say you're a shoe company, right? Right now, you could create a virtual event where you launch a shoe and then, get everybody to click through into, some 3D model of the shoe, and you can change some colors and off you go. That doesn't seem like an event to me. That seems like an advertisement that I went to a website to do. And in fact, that infrastructure lives there now. Where you could augment that is again, the marketing and communication story leading up to the launch of the shoe, the broadcast of the unveiling of the shoe, and perhaps the celebrity who walks into the room and with the shoes on and says these shoes are amazing, and then the post part of the event, of the major announcement, where you go out and send the shoes out, or and I'm speculating here.
So what's interesting that what we're seeing in terms of our discussion is that our industry is so wide and broad that the word virtual event means so many different things to different people. So I think that's one of the issues that we have. I mean, the idea, though, of what you're doing in creating this professionalism that makes it feel like you're in an experience in a two-dimensional place sounds very smart. Because I do agree that the Zoom calls and the bad technology and the internet's out and people talking over each other seems like something that is nice while we're learning it, but it won't last long.
Yeah, and there's a certain level of acceptance that we are all participating in right now, because it hasn't been done really well,
Right.
and then but once it is, everybody's going to go, oh, that's what we need.
We don't want AOL dial-up.
Yeah, exactly. A perfect example is Microsoft, the Xbox team. Again, upping my nerd factor here. They did a first look at their new console, which will be launched for the Christmas season this year, and that first look was terrible. It got panned, and the reason was that they, I think they did what every marketing team did. They were like, "Well, we were supposed to do this thing at E3. E3 is now canceled. What do we do? Well, we got to get the message out," and they did some broadcasts from home. Like 3 of their marketing and development team were on Zoom call, and they switched from full screen to somebody shared their screen and showed some trailer and all of that kind of thing. It was universally panned as a bad idea. But last week, Xbox came out with their gameplay demo event. It's a promotional tool. They would have done it at E3. They would have walked on stage and said, here's this cool thing. This is what our new console can do. And here are some of the games that are coming to it. And they would essentially play 6 or 7 trailers of different video games that they were launching. When you go and look at the broadcast from last week, it's night and day difference. And the engagement went skyrocketing on it. They professionally shot 4 or 5 interstitial interviews with their marketing and development team, and the head of Xbox Live and the head of game development. They did a little studio in their office. They shot with a professional camera, and of the 45-minute broadcast, that really composed only about 6 minutes of the broadcast. The rest of it was game trailers from various development studios. So if you compare it to their first one, the first one was a half hour and 25 minutes was trailers, and the things that surrounded the trailers, the guy talking on camera, looked very low production value. And because of that, people clicked off. They were like, I don't really care, and I'm not really getting the message here. Mm-hmm. But the moment that they changed that 6 minutes into a professionally shot 6 minutes, it turned it up by 11. And, and in the reality, all it was 3 little graphic interstitials that they would put on screen, and, 6 minutes of interview time. And that's all they had to do to up that message. That being said, there was the lead up, as I said, to the event, which was the marketing and communication and getting people engaged and sharing. And then the post, where they started to release all of the information about the new console and its hardware specs. And they, if you can literally look at the numbers from their first broadcast and see, 200,000 people were kind of watching it, up to 1.5 million for their second one. So I think that's the curve that we're all going on right now, and we can get there faster.
So the studio in the box is a product, the controller in the box is a product. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that with all of the technology that you've got set up, it's still going to be the actual professionalism of the storytelling and the production values that seems to be on top of what your studio in a box is correct? Is it? I mean, you're still giving people the ability to have a tool that is safe, but it doesn't stop any of the other aspects of a professional product.
No, it actually augments it and allows you to concentrate on those instead, right?
I see.
This is, we always thought that, so if we stuck a studio in a box in your house, right, and said, off you go, this is a professional camera, here's some lights and a professional microphone, in-ear monitors, all of the things. But then we also had to send you this 60-page manual on how to white balance. We would spend so much time trying to get you to white balance properly off your camera that we would lose the time that it takes for me to coach you on where to sit and or have you, that hour-long time that I may have before broadcast with you is really spent on IT support to go, pick that camera from your laptop, all of those kind of things.
Right.
And so, that's the focus that we put on that, was to ensure that the same way that when you walk into that ballroom and start and all you're worrying about is the speech that you've memorized and your performance as a speaker. In virtual events right now, people are still doing that thing where they spend hours trying to teach you how to put up how to put the camera into your laptop or select the right microphone. Right. And so by adding these solutions and adding this like production support throughout the process, we then allow producers and speakers and meeting planners the brain capacity to be able to go out and actually concentrate on the content of the message rather than, how are we connecting to Zoom, right?
But these are rental products, right? That you're sending, and they're sending them back as soon as they're done.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And so what are some of the coaching things that you have to coach people on now that you have not to worry about the technology? What are the things that people should be worrying about when they're doing a presentation?
Yeah, I mean, simple things like framing, right? And, camera placement and some lighting and, some basic film techniques that, potentially we hadn't been thinking about for many years. The simple rule of thirds, a lot of the time, like continuity is a big thing. We were doing one where we pre-taped the main presentation from a presenter because of the logistics, and to be honest, pre-taping is just always so much better. But then we needed a live Q&A afterwards. And so most of my coaching was with that speaker over the monitor channel to tell him, hey, can you move 2 inches to the left? And your mic yesterday when we recorded was over here. Could you just move it 3? And that book behind you is not the right book. Yesterday it was, the Songbirds, and today it's David Adler's book. Like, it's really nice that you want to, but we need to swap that out so that we can match shot to shot when we go to the live segment, right? As I said, framing is a big thing. Like, everybody sort of gets on camera and starts to and either leans to one side or the other, and we're constantly on camera saying, okay, no, sit up and move 2 inches to the left, because then you have to get into that nice thirds area. And simple thing like look at the camera. That is really, really important in doing a virtual event. We have this tendency, and this is a podcast, so nobody can see it, but the way that I've got this set up, you're actually on a screen just below my camera. And so it's very tempting to look down and see your face.
Oh, interesting.
But I shouldn't, because your eyes are right there, and I want to make eye contact with you. And so it takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of mental shifting to go away from that. But that's one of the key things that we tell our clients and our speakers is you need to look at the camera.
So one of the things that everybody seems to have a problem with is lighting at home.
Mm-hmm.
What is your magical rules on lighting for this kind of thing?
It's not a magical rule. It's a technique that's been used for over 150 years now, and that's simple 3-point lighting.
3-point lighting.
Yeah, I've got some. I've actually got a 3-point lighting system up right now, and that's giving me some face or key light, a little bit of fill light coming from over here, and then I've got a little bit of light in the back here just to separate myself from my background, so that I have a little bit of depth from the shot. But all of those, yes, you could go out and buy a bunch of these things to set them out in your house. But one of the things we wanted to make sure was in Studio in a Box is that lighting kit. So when you open the box, it's got a 3-point lighting kit in it, which again, all LED and plug and play. So once you've set that up, you're ready to go.
And so all of that. So how big is this box?
It fits in the back of a Honda Civic. I can tell you that it's about 18 inches high by 15 by 29. It comes in one carrying case.
And so when an event organizer wants to budget this kind of stuff, how do you budget for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are component parts of it. The Studio Box has a rental fee associated to it. Master Control is like renting that backstage production video village in a remote form. Then you're talking shipping and logistics and talent and labor and all those things. We are seeing average budgets between 30 and 50,000 per event to broadcast an hour, like a day's worth of broadcasting.
And what about the creative side of that? Is that when you take a job, are you now just selling the technology, or are you doing the entire job? It's sort of proprietary for what you do.
We're doing the entire job. That being said, we have integrated with a few producers who very talented producers who work all across North America, and they take a lot of that creative role. At which point we just support them. But it's sort of a mixed bag. As I mentioned at the top of this conversation, I came from the world of theater, and in the world of theater, nobody's really precious about their job, because the nature of it is that this week I'm the director and you're the stage manager.
Right.
Next week, the ASM is going to be our boss, and we're going to be working for them. So, I've never been precious about that. And if there's a role that allows us to fit into the team well, then we will. But that doesn't mean that we can't scale up to do the whole job from soup to nuts, as it were.
So go a little bit into the use cases for this, that what people are doing now. Like, what is a corporate planner doing? What is a meeting doing? How is this used the best? Who's your perfect customer, I guess, is the question too.
Yeah, it's really about trying to find a person who is, or a team that is looking to up their production value beyond what they can do themselves. And I guess my ideal customer is somebody who recognizes that there are a million little touch points within that production process. And, going it on your own is possible, but having an entire team behind you to be able to support you in every one of those points is where we sit best. To go back to Zoom or in any of those sort of platforms, the model is based on convenience of upload. Or convenience of connection. But what you sacrifice in that is an ability to control that point anymore. So if you were, David, to participate in an online event, and I'll pick on one product that is actually very good, but has some features that it needs to augment. vMix is a virtual video mixing platform that people are probably familiar with. And it has this feature called vMix Call. And when you, on my end, if I'm running vMix on my machine here, I can then send you a link that allows you to use your own device to come in and participate in it. So it's really great that way. Where it falls is that if there's ever an issue on your end from your laptop or through your connection, I literally have zero control over that. So there's that sacrifice that's made. So in our system, because the device that you are on is completely remote controlled from master control and has that functionality, from the point of you turning on that device and then joining into the ecosystem, we have control of every single point along that data stream. Right from my earphone isn't working. 1 second, let me fix that. And that's not you going into your system preferences. That's us in the remote studio clicking a button to make sure that that's working. Down to I can't see the other speaker on this event. No problem. Let me just route that to your machine, and then that pops up. So when you start talking about a ideal customer, I think it's the customer who is looking for that type of control and assurity during that process. If you're one of these people who doesn't find any value in that and just wants to get on a Zoom and do it super quick and easy, I wish you the best of luck. And there are solutions out there for you. We're not that solution. We're the solution for the ones that want to augment that process.
Or how far down the upstream or downstream are you with like a Zoom? You go from the invitations all the way to here's the recording. Mm-hmm. Are you integrating with registration systems? Does a person have to figure out their own way of doing that, or are you involved in that area of it as well?
We're not really involved in that aspect, although we can integrate some of that into the production process. But the same way that I said, there's no app for that. Like our solution doesn't solve everything,
right?
But it does go in. It takes the broadcast portion and makes it as the most professional you possibly could. That being said, we seamlessly integrate and work well with registration systems and digital venues and all of those to be able to integrate we're platform agnostic, I would say. So, if you wanted to use a vFairs, if you wanted to use, some other virtual platform, we're just sending a signal. Our output signal can go anywhere.
Right.
So we integrate into that team.
But as a producer, I assume you can handle soup to nuts if somebody came to you and said, we want you to handle the whole thing.
Yeah, we absolutely can. Yeah.
Now, okay, you ready for the crystal ball part of the show?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll try my best.
And this is impossible because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, I know.
Will this be part of our future in any event, or is this a stopgap, or is this the way things are going to be? What is your thinking on this?
I think that no matter what, in the future, some kind of virtual integration is going to be key. Pre-COVID, we would call it a webcast, or a portion of it was always a secondary thought, right? We were concentrating on the ballroom or the convention center and how it looked there, and would spend all of our money and our effort on that experience. And then we would let's pipe a feed over there to that encoder and then send it out to Facebook Live, and then we're done, right? I think in the future, no matter how quickly we get back to quote unquote normal as it is, that virtual and broadcast portion of your event is going to be integral to your communication strategy. I think in the future, we're going to be designing events to accommodate 1,000 people and 5 cameras rather than just one at the back. And because you have
1,000 people in the room, or 1,000 people plus the people.
Well, I think there's 1,000 people in that room, but then there's an audience of 5,000 to 6,000 online. We're seeing. It's amazing to see the numbers change right now. I think there was an event for Salesforce in Australia a couple months ago where they quickly changed to a virtual event. Yeah, so the Salesforce EMEA event would typically attract 18,000 attendees, and for a live event, that is incredible. When they went to virtual, they saw, I think the number was 250 to 300,000 viewers.
Wow.
And the reason being, and it's simple math for any business, that typically speaking, it would cost you about 10,000 US to send a salesperson to the Salesforce meeting. And it was valuable. But if you have a sales force of 30 people, you're going to send like just the head of business development, because there's an ROI to that investment. Well, now if it's virtual and it's online, and instead of $10,000, maybe it costs $5,000 to have somebody be part of that or participate in that learning in that event. Now I'm going to send all 30 of my people to that virtual platform and have them watch all of the content, because I've spent just as much as I would have to send Bill, the VP, but now I've got my entire sales force taking this training. So there's a lot of value there. So once we get back to the next step being hybrid, and then maybe back to live event, it behooves me as Salesforce to say, well, why would I not do the broadcast? Why would yes, maybe I'll have 18,000 people at this event, but then I'll have another 100,000 people watching it. And I got to really think about what I'm putting out through that camera, how I'm shooting that, who's directing that.
Yeah, the center of gravity is not in the room. Yeah,
the center of gravity can still be in the room in a production value sense. I mean, if you look at, like, we see this on TV every day, I'm sure you probably watched an episode of The Voice or, America's Got Talent. Yeah, there's 30,000 people in that room, and it looks slick, and there's tons of energy from the crowds, all of those things. But they're also really concentrating on the million other people who are watching it, right? And I think that's the direction that our whole industry is going to go.
Do you think that from a speaker point of view, that organizers will be more okay with a speaker being virtual and the audience being live at a stage, and then having this broadcast, so that you can charge a little less for Barack Obama, let's say? I don't know if you would.
Sure.
That's an example.
Yeah.
But is it the kind of thing where they can literally phone it in?
Yeah. I don't. I think you could guest people, right? In that model. And we've actually pitched that a couple of times, where we've had, essentially a host on stage or in the studio, and instead of flying Barack Obama to an interview in the studio, we would remote them in on screen in the studio, so that you would have, like, very much like you may have Anderson Cooper on the set of CNN, and then turns to a big LED screen to his left,
right.
and there's David Adler talking to him through a
right.
call.
Right.
I think that there's those kind of formats will come through. I do think that if you could get Barack Obama into a room, then I mean, that would be fantastic. But yes, you could charge for that. But yes, I think you would have to charge less to be a person in the room, but you could also charge that amount to the viewers online to be able
250,000 people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How about the areas of holograms and things like that? Do you think that's going to be here to stay, or that is going to be a technology we should watch?
I've always found, I kind of think it might be a bit of a fad. Those technologies were created to essentially do what we're doing in virtual events now, right? Tony Robbins didn't want to fly from LA to Toronto, but you really wanted to have him at the event. Here's a way to get Tony Robbins to not charge you $150,000 to fly, but charge you $50K to appear, at which point you spend another $50K to put his hologram in the room. So economically speaking, it's less and still kind of a thrill. I don't think it's a long-term technology. I don't think all of our events are going to turn into hologram events, because the amount of setup that it takes to create that hologram in a physical space is exponentially higher than putting up a high definition screen and having them call in remotely, right? So, economically, the gimmick is something you can do to make it look cool, but not necessarily necessary to transmit your message.
How about the concept of the shared reality, the Magic Leap, and things like that? Is that coming anytime to a place near us, or is that sort of still pie in the sky? The virtual, the virtual,
like the VR kind of stuff. Yeah.
Are we going to be wearing glasses at events that'll be augmenting everything and have the audience outside of the room also be part of that?
I don't think so. And the reason being that I think that there's a huge barrier of entry right now. And it's sort of a double-edged sword when we start talking about, the beginning of virtual events was all Zoom. The reason that it was all Zoom was the barrier of entry was so low that, anybody could download the program on their device and start using it right away. Whereas the barrier to entry on VR, unless something drastically changes in the market, is so high that if you created a VR event right now and you spent all the money necessary to render out a 3D environment and map out the experience, and then said, hey, everybody, let's do a VR event. Well, how many people own a VR headset? And then the solution is, do we then send out a VR headset to all the people? Well, now your shipping expense, now your upfront cost to be able to supply everybody, like 150,000 people with, or even 100 people with a VR headset, is just exponential. So this is why I say, don't get me wrong, if Oculus or any of those other manufacturers were to come out with a consumer grade, quick model that was supplemented by some kind of provider, then potentially that could be a thing. Like if we all had VR, like if it was a common thing to have a VR headset in our house, absolutely, I think VR would be a way to go. But right now, how many people have VR headsets sitting in their room?
Right. But it sounds to me like you're focusing on the quality, you're focusing on the idea of upping the game a little bit, and the storytelling, and so that seems to never die. I mean, that seems to be so. Even if you do it with VR, if the storytelling isn't great and the production values aren't great, it looks crappy, basically. So you're like taking the best of what we can do.
I think that goes with every medium, right? Like if you were to turn on TV tonight and watch a show on HBO, and the production value was terrible, but even if the story was great, you'd turn it off, right? And when you're talking about screen fatigue or Zoom fatigue or whatever that phrase is that we use in the industry, it's not because people don't want to watch the screen. It's because the content has low production value and the story isn't there. I always balk against anybody who says, look, you can't possibly capture somebody's attention for 3 hours on a screen, because you do that every single night. In fact, it's what saved my marriage and prevented me from selling my children, is that I can put them in front of a TV and get them engaged for a couple of hours while daddy does a little bit of work, and we do this every night. And what comes out of that, what you see on that screen every night when you're watching with your family, is good production value, great story, and purposeful content. And if we can integrate those into our virtual events, then it will be no question that we can captivate audiences for however much time we need.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Do you want to let people know how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah,
and also what they should be asking you? Like, what are some of the key questions that you get when people are looking into this product?
Yeah, so the easiest way to get in touch is go to byrneproductionservices.com, or just send me an email at matthew@byrneproductionservices.com. The questions that I get asked is a very interesting one. So again, we're sort of still in that phase of what's the app for that, right? And how do I do this as easily and as cheaply as possible? And the majority of the conversations I have is about recontextualizing that into, you get what you pay for it, but where the less money you spend on something, or the less investment you make on that process, the more barriers to or the less control that you will have on your content and your message. From the practical, we're talking about, how many people need to be on the broadcast, what kind of quality it is, where is it going to be hosted, which are things that I don't think people think about. They think of a platform as, oh, I'm just going to use this platform and you'll send me a link and then we can do it. Customers should be talking about the process of not only the broadcast itself, but how we get into that broadcast. Through the rehearsal process, through the development process, through the ideation and creation of that. To bring it back to the film and television industry, Walking Dead wasn't created by somebody said, "Okay, I wrote a script, everybody just go." It took years and years. Now we don't have years and years to put on an event, but again, going back to pre-COVID and live events. If you said, "Look, we're doing a live event for 5,000 people next week," you'd be walked out of the building, right? You need to do that long-term planning, and I think people are still in that panic mode of like, "Well, we got to do something. What can we do? Press that button, go!" Right?
Yeah. The platforms are built for that, so people realize that they don't see it like a planner from a big company will come in, and they don't need that many of their own people involved because there's so many systems already set up. Now what you're doing is you're pioneering a whole new ecosystem, and they realize that they need all the things that were packaged into other things.
Sure, that's a great way to
work.
Yeah. That being said, I appreciate the compliment, but we're not pioneering a new system. We borrowed these systems from esports production and television production because they've been doing it for years. What we're doing is, as I said, recontextualizing it into this industry. And there's a lot of client education right now on shifting their mentality from, as you said, those prepackaged things like, the AV company just took care of it, to,
right.
Actually having to discuss like, well, where is your speaker? How are we getting them in? What's their internet connection? When are we scheduling rehearsal broadcast time? When are we doing pre-records? When are we doing this and this and this? It even comes down to staffing. I was pitching a show to a client a while ago, and I was trying to explain the staffing that we had on the show, which was, a network engineer and an engineer in charge and a video switcher and a content guy and blah, 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 all these positions. And then it was a studio shoot, and we said, so those guys will be over here and you'll never see them, but they're working in the background. And we had to add somebody into the team, which on a live event, we typically wouldn't, which was a floor director, and his whole a floor director and what we called the truck guy. In broadcast, he would be the dome truck guy who's on headset in the room to say, yeah, everything's working in the truck. And so, because we needed to add that into that production process for the client who's used to seeing 30 people and now is only seeing 2. And so there needs to be a shift in the mentality in how we produce these things and what the staffing model and the team composition is on that. And that's one of the things that we do throughout that process, is to guide the clients through that television production model rather than the live event model, and because they're slightly different.
So one last question. Who on the team, in a sophisticated event team, is managing you guys? Is it, the VP of events is not necessarily the hands-on person. Do they need to have somebody that specializes it in order to manage this? Or do they, where does that fall in the organization at this point? Because it's pretty much a new job.
Yeah, it is. I've heard the term technical virtual specialist and various things on that. I really think that that's still the meeting planner. I think it's the meeting planner who is again needs to shift a little bit on how they approach their project, but they're still the communications, project management, overall project lead person within that. I think that the senior vice president of events or marketing and communications really does need to stick with that person to be able to manage teams like us. Because again, we're a component of that virtual event, and we can certainly augment that, but we're not a registration platform. You need a meeting planner to manage those two big buckets, right?
Right. This sounds good. You have convinced me.
Yeah.
The context of this is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see how a meeting planner could be overwhelmed with this. But then when he has the reality of suggesting, let's have a group meeting and let's do Zoom, and the CEO is like, oh my God, I can't get the microphone to work or something. Sure. It puts everybody at risk.
Yeah.
So this is a definite insurance policy to making sure that the quality and the brand is the most important thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to depending on a Zoom that you do for the wedding after party that you're having now.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very important. So thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, David.
And we'll look forward to talking more. This is a fascinating conversation, and you're not too nerdy for me.
Okay, good.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the Gather Geeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you join us again for the next episode of Gather Geeks. Until then, gather on.